Good evening from the News Radio, 1120 AM and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am Gunter McGraw, a.k.a. Bill Lundun. You can hear me on the wake-up call 6 a.m. to 9, Monday through Friday mornings on KPNW Radio or streaming at kpnw.com. You know who this news is brought to you by? I'll tell you, because I know you're sitting there going, who could it be? Who could it be? It would be Dr. Michael Bratland of Chris Dental. And if you call him today, he'll see you today. He's the only dentist I know of that actually gives you his cell phone number. I know this because he texts me. It's usually cat pictures. All right, here's a look at some of the stories we're following. Well, finally, Nikki Haley suspended her presidential campaign Wednesday after being pretty much soundly defeated across the country on Super Tuesday, which leaves Donald Trump as the last remaining major candidate for the 2024 Republican nomination. But as is usually the case when a candidate gets routed, there was no concession call, no let's rally around the party's candidate talk from Haley. Specifically, Haley did not endorse former President Trump in a speech in Charleston, South Carolina, when she suspended her campaign. Instead, she challenged him to win the support of the moderate Republicans and independent voters who supported her. Haley is South Carolina, or at least former South Carolina governor, and UN ambassador, was Trump's first significant rival when she jumped into the race back in February of last year. She spent the final phase of her campaign aggressively warning the GOP against embracing Trump, who she argued was too consumed by, in her words, chaos and personal grievance to defeat current President Joe Biden. Trump, on Tuesday night, declared that the GOP was united around him, but in a statement shortly afterward, Haley's spokesperson, Olivia Perez-Cubas, said, "Unity is not achieved by simply claiming we're united." In fact, Perez-Cubas doubled down, saying in state after state that there remains a large block of Republican primary voters who are expressing deep concerns about Donald Trump. Perez-Cubas went on to say, "That is not the unity our party needs for success. Addressing those voters' concerns will make the Republican Party in America better." Now, earlier this week, Haley also said she no longer feels bound by a pledge that required all GOP contenders to support the party's eventual nominee in order to participate in the primary debates. In other words, she ain't going to do it. Wednesday, Trump's campaign, in a fundraising letter, claimed that Haley had endorsed Trump. She didn't. In a social media post, Trump still mocked his former rival, while at the same time extending an invitation to, quote, all of the Haley supporters to join the greatest movement in the history of our nation. All in caps. Biden is the enemy. He is destroying the country. He said, "Make America great again." Meanwhile, Biden was trying to welcome any voters who backed Haley, acknowledging Trump's previous rejection of her supporters. There's a reason, of course, why Haley suspended her campaign as opposed to just, pulled out. She's holding on, suspending her candidacy because, after all, she won Vermont and Washington, D.C., because if Trump were actually convicted, she might still have a chance to run for president. Same goes with Ron DeSantis. He did the same thing. So momentum is building in an interesting case regarding homeless encampments that are going to be argued before the U.S. Supreme Court next month, and it will have major implications for cities as homelessness has reached record highs. Dozens of briefs have been filed in recent days, and they've joined a growing number of Western state and local officials, including those not only in Idaho but also Montana, who've submitted briefs urging the justices to overturn a controversial lower court decision preventing them from addressing just rampant homeless encampments. Now, back in 2018, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it was unconstitutional to punish people who are, in their words, involuntarily homeless for sleeping outside if there's not enough shelter beds. In Martin v. Boise, the decision found that doing so would violate the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. Now, social justice advocates have long supported the decision, saying the homeless shouldn't be criminalized. But a lot of officials in the West, on the other hand, say the decision has prevented them from managing a surge of encampments on sidewalks, in parks, in other public spaces, along waterways, even in traffic medians. The case before the Supreme Court was brought by little old Grants Pass in southern Oregon, and that has been barred by court orders citing Martin v. Boise, from enforcing local ordinance that prohibits sleeping and camping in parks and on public property. Now, in its petition, Grants Pass said it and other cities find themselves hamstrung responding to public encampments. Now, in a brief that was submitted Monday, the U.S. Department of Justice said the Ninth Circuit was correct in finding that ordinances punishing people for sleeping outside where there isn't enough shelter space were unconstitutional, but erred in having the decision apply to all homeless people without requiring a more particularized inquiry into the circumstances of the individuals to whom the ordinances may be supplied. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelagar in the brief said the court declined to decide what showing is required to establish that an individual is involuntarily homeless. That error, according to the DOJ, is crucial. And the DOJ asked the justices to throw out the Ninth Circuit decision and send it back to the lower courts for review. Also this week, 6 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, including Representative Cliff Bentz, whose district covers Grants Pass, as well as 5 congressmen representing California, filed an amicus brief supporting the petition. The lawmakers wrote that the Ninth Circuit's ruling makes it practically impossible for municipalities to combat crime that occurs near encampments. Along with that, a coalition of 24 attorneys general have also backed Grants Pass petition. The justices are going to hear oral arguments on April 22nd. So more bad news for PacifiCorp, aka Pacific Power. They now have to pay another $42 million to 10 victims of devastating wildfires on Labor Day in 2020. That's up in the Sandy Am area in Lynn County. The latest verdict in the litigation is bad for PacifiCorp, which is expected to see them potentially on the hook for billions, with a B, of dollars in damages. Last June, a jury found PacifiCorp liable for negligently failing to cut power to 600,000 customers despite warnings from top fire officials. The jury determined that PacifiCorp acted negligently and willfully and should have to pay punitive and other damage. That decision applied to a class, including the owners of up to 2,500 properties. While Tuesday's decision was yet the third verdict applying last year's ruling to a specific set of plaintiffs. Last month, a jury awarded $85 million to a different set of 9 plaintiffs, and the jury found that PacifiCorp was liable and awarded about $90 million to 17 homeowners named as plaintiffs in that case. Thousands of other class members are still awaiting trials, though the sides are expected to at least engage in some sort of mediation that PacifiCorp hopes leads to a settlement. PacifiCorp is a unit of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, and they said they will appeal. The utility said, though, that it's settled hundreds of claims relating to the fires and remains committed to settling all reasonable claims for damages under Oregon law. Now, those fires were among the worst natural disasters in Oregon's history. Killed over 9 people. It burned over 1,875 square miles and destroyed about 5,000 homes and other structures. And the U.S. government is also threatening to sue PacifiCorp to recover about $1 billion in costs related to the 2020 wildfires in southern Oregon and northern California. Well, it looks like Lavon Griffin Vlad was a perfect choice for Oregon Secretary of State after Shamia Fagan stepped down from that position. Vlad was put in that position, actually appointed to be Secretary of State by Governor Tina Kotek. And she made a very interesting decision and waited until the very last second to announce it. Here's what that amounts to. Republican candidate Shannon Monahan announced way back in December that she was going to run for Oregon Senate District 27 seat. Now, that's the seat currently held by State Senator Tim Knopp. Knopp can't run again because of Measure 113, because he walked out and was unexcused for over 10 days of a legislative session last year. 113 said if you have an unexcused absence for more than 10 days, you can't run again. So Monahan said, well, looks like I'm stepping in. And she was supported by State Senator Tim Knopp. Well, it turns out on Friday, the Secretary of State's office sent a letter to Monahan, and it said she didn't meet the qualifications to run for the seat based on her residency eligibility. According to the letter, Monahan didn't meet the requirements of being an inhabitant of the district 1 year before the election. The period of required residency for the 2024 election began on November 5th of 2023. Now, what happens here is kind of interesting. Monahan actually was the former executive director of the Downtown Bend Business Association. And the Secretary of State's ruling comes late enough that it means another Republican can't file to run. As a matter of fact, it eliminates all competition for Bend City Council member Anthony Broadman, a Democratic candidate for the seat. Now, this letter could have been sent months ago, and another candidate could have stepped in. But no, we'll wait until after all the filing deadlines, and then we'll make the announcement and the decision. So it ensures that that seat, which has been Republican for many, many, many years, will now be in the hands of a Democrat and add to the supermajority in the Oregon legislature of Democrats. Well, an amended bill that would have kept Oregon on permanent standard time if Washington and California adopted to do the same will not move forward in this session. Dang it! Namely because, ironically, it ran out of time. The Oregon Senate narrowly approved Senate Bill 1548 on a 16-14 vote, and it was expected to go to the House next for consideration. But Oregon House Speaker Dan Rayfield said that the bill now is effectively dead because, in his words, there's not enough time left in the session to consider the bill. Rayfield went on, given the shortened timeline and the queue of critical bills that we're working through, we aren't able to give enough time to considering the merits of the bill in the time that we have left this session. Now, this session actually runs out on Sunday. Senate Bill 1548 would have done away with daylight savings time, and Oregon would permanently be on standard time. So, once again, fall back, spring forward, or spring forward, fall back, or whatever the hell that is. The Oregon Senate on Tuesday approved a bill that would increase retirement benefits for public employees who work in crime or mental health-related environments, including DAs and state police forensic scientists, along with state psychiatric hospital workers. The biggest boost in collective retirement benefits will go to police and firefighters who were hired after the late 1990s or haven't spent decades on the job. That bill will go to Governor Tina Kotek's desk for final approval. Police and firefighters currently, who've logged 25 years in those roles, can retire with full pensions at age 50 or 53, depending on when they were hired. Well, this new bill, House Bill 4045, which passed the Senate on a 25-5 vote, would lower the full pension retirement age for police officers and firefighters who've logged at least 5 years to age 55 from age 55 from 60. Most of the bill's measures would go into effect in January of next year. Now, state fiscal experts who are supposed to spell out the costs of any bill before lawmakers cast their final votes said the total cost of the expanded pension bill is, we don't know. It's unknown. They were able to say that lowering the retirement age for police officers and firefighters will increase the PERS, Public Employees Retirement System, deficit, also known as the unfunded liability, by at least $110 million, according to a state analysis. It's well over $1 billion in the hole now. Well, only in Oregon. A bill directing the state treasurer to divest Oregon's public employees' retirement system of nearly $1 billion in high-earning investments in coal mining and energy companies awaits the signature of Governor Tina Kotek. House Bill 4083, so-called or known as the Coal Act, passed the Oregon Senate on a 16-13 party line vote and a similar party line 33-24 vote in the House in February. The proposal would direct the Treasury to ensure that the state's public employee retirement system does not hold in stock in companies that derive 20% or more of their revenue from coal production or things like oil, tar sands, and so on. Normally, those are some of the highest earning holdings that PERS has, which is part of the reason that the unfunded liability isn't bigger. It also directs the Treasury to limit new investments in those companies. Far-left progressive Con Pham, a Democrat from Portland, sponsored the bill. It was her third try to pass legislation limiting fossil fuel investments in PERS because she says it causes climate change. Tobias Reed, who is in his final year as state treasurer, has also proposed a plan to get PERS investments to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Oh, it's a name from the past, and it's coming back. Remember former Republican gubernatorial candidate Christine Drazan? She lost to Tina Kotek. Well, now she wants to go back to the Oregon House as a representative. Drazan represented Clackamas County in the Oregon House for 3 years from 2019 to 2022 and was the House Republican leader for the majority of their time in office. She left the legislature to run for governor in 2022 and then lost to Democrat Tina Kotek by 3.5 percentage points. Republican James Heeb replaced Drazan as the appointed representative for Oregon's 51st District and won re-election to the seat in 2022. He told the Oregon Capital Chronicle that he was surprised to learn that Drazan will challenge him in the May primary, but he says he's still going to seek re-election. Drazan worked for decades as a staffer and a lobbyist before running for a seat in 2019. She led House Republicans in a 2020 walkout to successfully protest a greenhouse gas cap and trade bill. That same year, Republicans, with Drazan as their leader, picked up a net total of 1 whole seat in the House. Drazan said she feels compelled to get back to lawmaking to combat rampant crime and homelessness, failing schools, and an affordability crisis that's been compounded by Oregon's high taxes. In other words, that's pretty much the same stuff she ran on when she was going for governor. Well, this is good news for particularly tourist destinations and Oregon parks. A bill likely to help reopen a number of hiking trails on the coast unanimously passed the Oregon House and now heads to the governor's desk. Senate Bill 1576 would temporarily restore the legal power of recreational immunity. Now, that law was pretty much thrown out the window last July when Oregon's Court of Appeals ruled the city of Newport couldn't use recreational immunity to dismiss a lawsuit from a woman who sued the city after she slipped and fell on a trail bridge. That ruling sparked a wave of trail closures from cities worried about lawsuits that they couldn't afford to fight, particularly after the main insurance company, CIS, that covers these kinds of accidents on Oregon lands, told the state, yeah, you need to close all the trails down because we're not going to cover all these suits. The bill is only a temporary fix, but sunsets in 2026, and the hope is they can come with a more fleshed out bill prior to that time. News brought to you by Dr. Michael Bradland. And now, Rick, it is your cue to get real, or what passes as real. Yeah.